everyone. Republic Jim here. I'm back out in the barn for a trap bar deadlift session, and it seemed like an appropriate time to discuss another article that I read recently concerning the Army Combat Fitness Test. And since that's a topic that I've done a few videos on in the past, and doing this one now, and I'm likely to do more in the future, I went ahead and created a playlist for that. So if you're interested and want to see any of the previous videos that I've done about it, then just check out the ACFT playlist and see my discussions on the evolution of that. But for the moment, I'm just warming up, ramping up in the weights, and I've already done some lighter sets and just continuing to warm up, so I need to get back to it before I cool off here. All right, and just for a point of reference, for some perspective later on, this that I'm warming up with here is 250 pounds. The tires on the trap bar by themselves are 160, and I've got a set of 45s on there. So currently at 250. And doesn't really matter, but just keep that number in the back of your mind, because I will come back to that and it's relevant later on. But I will put a link to the article down in the description. I thought it was really interesting. It says a lot of what I discussed in my most recent video that I did about the ACFT, talking about the standards being low, and that right now the way the scoring is done, there are no minimums for different MOSs, and some of the thoughts on that among Congress and military brass is that certain MOSs need to have more stringent standards, like I discussed in my last one about people in combat or related fields where lives are at stake. It doesn't make sense to have relaxed standards just because somebody is female or older or whatever. It should just be one straight neutral standard for everybody to meet that requirement. So it talks about that in the article, and you know, it goes into some other interesting topics there. So feel free to check out that article. So what I find especially ironic about this discussion now is that the original scoring tables and standards that they put out back in 2020 actually just had one table for everyone, regardless of male or female or age. There's just one hard and fast scoring table. And it actually had things divided up, like, you know, minimum standards for different MOS. It had heavy, significant, and moderate levels. And I'll put a link to the document, the scoring tables for 2020 down in the description. But also I will put a screenshot of the first page of that document up here. You can check it out. It's really straightforward. There's just columns for the 6 different events and scores based on how people perform on each one. And you can see the colored bars going across horizontally to show the minimums for different levels of MOS. And just to kind of give you an idea of how simple it was, this is the first page of that document. It's a grand total of 2 pages, because that's all it took to spell out what the requirements were. So, you know, nothing complicated at all, just very basic. But the issue that they had back then was that too many people were failing, and especially a very high percentage of females. And of course, with our kinder, gentler army that's focused on diversity, they really couldn't accept that. So they had to make some changes. And unfortunately, I think the primary reason people were failing, and especially females, was because of the leg tuck, which does require a decent amount of upper body strength, and as well as abdominal strength. But regardless of what you think of the leg tuck, which I discussed early on in one of my videos, that when they got rid of that and they replaced it, which another one of my videos I talk about the plank, which I think is a stupid replacement, but nonetheless they replaced it with that. So getting rid of the leg tuck should have solved the problem, but they decided at that time to throw the baby out with the bathwater and switch to a completely different scoring system, which I'll get to in just a moment, but that's the one that they currently have. So now that brings us to the current 2023 scoring tables, which again, I'll put a link to that document in the description, but I'm just going to put a screenshot up here of the first, or at least part of the first page of that document, which just happens to be for the trap bar deadlift, 3 rep max. And as you can see, now it's divided up between male and female, and I don't even know how they deal with the whole rabbit hole of whether somebody identifies as something else, but regardless, I guess they just go by biologic sex as opposed to gender, and and just go with male and female, which is fine. But they break it down into those 2 categories, and then age groups all across from youngest on the left all the way across the page to the oldest on the right. And as you can see, it adds a lot of complication, and the standards change depending on the gender and or sex and age, and gets real complicated in a hurry, and those standards go down really quickly, especially by the time you're talking about like a middle-aged woman, which, as I discussed in my previous video, is fine if we're talking about just something that's going to affect chances for advancement and they're working an office job, some sort of support thing. You know, I have no problem with separate categories for that, but like they're saying in the article I reference, the MOSs where strength and fitness are more critical, they need to have consistent standards and something that's halfway challenging. So, pardon me. So, anyway, point being that, okay, sorry, I had to check and make sure it was still recording. It tends to cut out sometimes when it gets cold. Anyway, point being though that there is just like a basic minimum standard across the board for everybody. Even like a 20-year-old male is the same as, you know, a 60-year-old woman. That's the absolute minimum they have to do to pass, and that's just ridiculous. But just to bring back, circle around to that number that I mentioned at the start, and that 250 pounds I did as part of my warming up and ramping up in weight. If you look over in the second column from the right, I'm 57 years old. So according to that scoring scale that they have in place now, 250 pounds for 3 reps is a perfect score. I could have just pulled 3 reps with that 250 and said, okay, I'm done with that. I got top score I could get and I'm ready for the next event. And that's just lame. And then when you look down at the bottom of that column at where the cutoff is for passing, it's even more appalling. And I shudder to think that they would allow anybody like that anywhere close to combat. So clearly there needs to be some rethinking and maybe going back to like the 2020 scale that they had. They could tweak it some more, but it certainly would be a lot better than the current one they have. So that about wraps it up for my thoughts on that article. Just wanted to go over that while I was getting this done. I'm going to have to take a little bit longer rest periods in between sets now because I'm at my working set, or my work weight, you know. Got a couple more sets to do with that. And I'm going to start breathing a lot harder with that weight, but that's more the type of standard that I think that we should be looking for with our armed forces, especially for heavy MOSs. And, you know, the same sort of appropriate increase in challenge in some of the other events. So, anyway, hope you found it interesting. Let me know if you have any thoughts or suggestions on the topic. This has been Republic Jim. I'll talk to you later.